He thought it was just another day in court, a routine hearing, nothing out of the ordinary. But when a judge looked at him, not as a man, but through the lens of prejudice, everything changed. A fine was issued, not for what he did, but for who he was. What the judge didn't know was that this man carried a truth powerful enough to turn the entire courtroom upside down. How could a single moment of racism backfire so dramatically? Stay with me because this story will leave you questioning justice itself. Marcus was the kind of man who blended into a crowd. Quiet, disciplined, and focused. He built his life around service and responsibility. Most days began before sunrise, with files stacked high on his desk and a determination to uphold the law, a duty he carried with pride. To neighbors, he was just another face passing by. But beneath the surface, Marcus was a man of principle, working in silence for justice. On that day, nothing seemed unusual. He stepped into the courthouse with steady steps, confident yet calm, expecting another routine matter. But as he entered, the weight of unseen eyes pressed on him, eyes that didn't see his dedication, his sacrifice, or his humanity. They saw only the color of his skin. And in that moment, a storm was waiting to break. The courtroom carried a certain chill that day, marble walls, polished floors, and the sharp echo of footsteps bouncing through the halls. Marcus had been here countless times before, but this time felt different. He could sense the stares, the whispers just out of earshot. When his name was called, he stepped forward, calm as ever, holding the same quiet dignity he always carried. But across the bench, the judge's gaze was heavy, sharp, and unkind. It wasn't the look of fairness or duty. It was something colder, something that stripped away Marcus's humanity before a single word had been spoken. The fine was delivered swiftly, without discussion, without reason that made sense. It wasn't about law, not about justice. It was about power. And power, in the wrong hand, can be dangerous. Marcus felt the heat rise in his chest. This wasn't just a slip of judgment, it was personal. Every eye in the courtroom shifted toward him, waiting to see how he would respond. Should he argue? Should he stay silent? Every option came with risk. To speak out might bring more punishment. To stay quiet might mean accepting something he knew was wrong. The papers were handed down, stamped with authority, as though his life could be reduced to numbers and ink. Marcus took them in silence, his jaw tight, his pulse steady but quickening. The fine was unfair, yes, but the deeper wound was the message behind it. You don't belong here. Still, Marcus knew something the judge didn't. He carried a truth that had the power to shake the very foundation of that courtroom. But revealing it too soon would rob him of the moment. So he waited, choosing restraint over rage, patience over pride. Yet beneath that calm exterior, tension coiled tighter with every passing second. The judge leaned back, smug in his decision, certain that the man before him was powerless. The gavel struck a sharp crack that echoed like a warning shot. Marcus turned to leave, his steps measured, but inside his resolve hardened. This wasn't over. Not yet. Because sooner than anyone expected, the truth about who Marcus really was and the role he played in upholding the very laws this judge twisted would come crashing down. And when it did, the balance of power in that room would shift in a way no one could ignore. The air in the courtroom grew heavier, charged with an invisible weight that pressed on every shoulder. The judge believed the moment was settled, that his word was final, that his prejudice had gone unchallenged. Marcus stood there, the fine in his hand, his silence mistaken for submission. But silence can be the sharpest blade. Then came the moment. The clerk called his full title, not defendant, not civilian, but the very role that carried authority equal to, if not greater than, the one sitting high on the bench. Federal prosecutor. The words cut through the room like thunder. Heads turned. Whispers spread. The smugness on the judge's face faltered, cracking into disbelief. For a heartbeat, the room froze. The same man who had been reduced to nothing more than the color of his skin was suddenly revealed for who he truly was, a man who upheld the very justice system the judge had just corrupted. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone carried the weight of truth, and truth has a way of silencing even the loudest prejudice. The gavel that once sounded like power now seemed fragile, almost hollow against the realization of what had just unfolded. The judge shifted uncomfortably, the authority slipping from his grasp. But the damage was already done. His bias had been exposed not in whispers, not in private, but in the very house of justice he swore to protect. And as Marcus stood there, steady and unshaken, the entire courtroom felt it. This was no longer about a fine, no longer about one man. It was about a system that still allowed a robe to cover racism. The silence stretched long, heavy, and undeniable. And then, the question hung in the air like a challenge. What happens when justice itself stands on trial? The courtroom eventually moved on. But for Marcus, the moment lingered. He had stood in silence while prejudice tried to write his story for him. And in the end, the truth had shattered that lie. The judge's authority cracked that day not because Marcus raised his voice, but because his very existence as a black man in a position of power exposed the ugliness hidden behind the robe. But while Marcus left with his dignity intact, the stain of the incident couldn't be ignored. If a man who upheld the law could be treated as less than human, what did that mean for those without the same title, without the same shield of authority? His case was not the exception, it was a mirror reflecting the reality many face every day, often without witnesses, without justice, and without the chance for the truth to save them. This story wasn't just about one man and one courtroom. It was about a system that still allows bias to shape outcomes, about the countless voices silenced before they can even speak, and about the question that lingers long after the gavel falls: who is justice really serving? Marcus walked out of that courthouse not as a victim, but as a reminder that silence can hold power, but so can exposure. His story forces us to look at the uncomfortable truth. Racism doesn't disappear when someone wears a robe, carries a badge, or sits in a seat of power. And now, the question is no longer what happened to Marcus. The question is, how many more courtrooms, how many more lives, before justice truly means justice for all?